Yes, thank you so much, Guy. And time is of the essence, so let's get to it. We are joined, as you say, by the French Finance Minister, Bruno Le Maire. Thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, you knew I was going to ask you as a first question, what's your take on the European Central Bank? Because they hiked again, rates of 4%. Some say enough is enough. They have to stop. What's your take?
You know, the ECB is independent, but I would like to quote what Christine Lagarde said. I think that we are at the right level of interest rates in the EU to stop inflation and to reduce inflation. And this is the goal of these interest rates, to reduce inflation. We are on the right track. And I think, as Christine Lagarde said, that we should stick to that level of interest rates. It is the right level to reduce inflation.
So if I read between the lines, what you say is that you feel this was 25 basis points and it's over. Let's keep them high for long, but don't add. Since
we are on the verge of reducing inflation, we are on the right track. I don't see, as Christine Lagarde said, any need to go any further. 4%, that's a very high level of interest rates. It might have some impact on the level of growth, on the level of activity. So we are on the right track to reduce inflation, which must be our common goal. Enough is enough.
Okay, well, that was very clear, in fact. Let's move on to the other big topic, because we should talk about this week, and this was a massive decision, and we saw it reflected in the market immediately, the octo sectors. There is now a probe that is going to start into Chinese electric vehicles. The head of the European Commission said they have flooded, quote, the market with cheap subsidies. This was a political victory for your country. You wanted this included by the Commission. Now you have it. What are you going to get out of it?
It is the decision of the Commission, but we support this decision. No, we did not push anything. We just want to have a fair competition between China and the EU. China is a key partner for the EU. But the partnership, the economic partnership between our two continents, between China and the EU, must be based on the same rules and must be based on a level playing field. So if there is any doubt that there is really a level playing field between China and the EU, it's up to the Commission to launch this anti-subsidies investigation. This investigation is most welcome. It is nothing against China, nothing against our Chinese partner, just for the sake of preserving the same rules.
And do you fear, however, that the Chinese are not going to look at that in the same way, that this is going to lead to a trade war? I mean, that's some of the fears reflected over the past 48 hours. Is this going to unleash potentially a trade war?
No, that's exactly what we want to avoid. We are not here to trigger any kind of trade war. We are just here to ensure that fair rules are being implemented by all partners, whether by China or by any other partner. The responsibility of the Commission is to ensure that trade is based on fair rules and reciprocity. That's the meaning of this anti-subsidies investigation.
Even if you have all of your very nice handbags that you sent, all of the luxury goods that go to China, Airbus, also big companies that you produce, whereas China says, well, if you're being protectionist or what we perceive as protectionist, then we're going to do the same thing to you. Is that something that you factor here at some point?
It has nothing to do with protectionism. Applying the rules, abiding by the rules of the WTO is not protectionism, it's fair trade. China is a member of the WTO. All EU member states are members of the WTO. We have to abide by the same rules. Nothing to do with protectionism. It is only the best way of ensuring that the rules are the same for everybody.
Can I ask you, some say, because there is always this fear of what China may do, that it has prevented action in areas where some would argue it is very fair to say China abuses its position. In Europe, it wiped out the entire solar industry. The Commission referred to this. Companies that were very good that went into bankruptcy. Should we say at one point in the European Union, there is no need to fear China? It's a trap to think we can't take action because we fear China.
I think it's good news that Europe realizes the necessity to defend its economic interest. The US are defending their economic interest. China is defending its economic interest. The EU must do the same. And this investigation is the best way of explaining, well, we have economic interests. We want trade to be based on fair rules, so we will ensure that the rules are the same for everybody. We don't have to fear any country. We are the EU. We are the single market. We are one of the most powerful economic continents in the world. We need to defend our economic financial, social, environmental interests.
And is this the beginning of a bigger rethinking? Because we go into electric cars, but would you say it may not be just the EVs? Maybe there's a whole range of areas that we should take a look at to what the state of that fair play is.
On all areas, we have
but
to
any
ensure.
Specific?
On
Renewables,
all areas, maybe solar panels, maybe other areas, we have to ensure that trade is based on fair rules. It is maybe the beginning of a new period, a new era, where the EU starts thinking about its own interest, starts looking at the rules that have been decided and have been applied, and starts thinking about defending its interests.
And let's talk about the French economy. Well, to be fair, what you're trying to do is overtake Germany, right? That's your goal. You want to be the biggest economy in the euro area.
Our goal is clearly to have growth in France and to have growth in Germany. Germany is our first economic partner. This is not good news when you have Germany facing recession, because of course it has a direct impact on the level of activity in France. So I really want to have more growth in Europe. And this is one of the key challenges for 2024. I explained to my colleagues today in Spain that we cannot be satisfied with the level of growth that we have today in Europe and that is forecast for 2024. We cannot be satisfied by the slowdown in Europe. There is growth in the US and a slowdown in the EU. We must take decisive steps to give a new impetus and to get a solid, sustainable and stronger growth in 2024.
And that slowdown, do you think it will affect your country? Because a lot of the credibility of the French government depends on showing that there is sustainable growth now.
We have growth in 2023, 1%. We will have more growth in 2024. Our forecast is 1.4. But I strongly believe that we should define altogether a new economic and industrial strategy for EU based on cheap electricity prices, based on the simplification of the norms, and we are really fully determined with Christian Lindner to give an impetus to that idea. Third, based on innovation and investment, and fourth, based on competitiveness.
And when you spoke to Christian Lindner, there's also this, and that's your German counterpart, there's also a big debate about the European fiscal rules. The Germans are clear, they want to see benchmarks for debt deficit. Others say this is just stifling the economy. I mean, you're fixated on numbers that have not produced massive investment across the European Union. Next year, if there isn't a fiscal rules reform, you're going to see countries that could get punished for not hitting those numbers. Some will say that is just, it is crazy. It makes no sense. Is that acceptable to you?
I want to make things very clear. France wants to have sound public finances everywhere in the Eurozone. We want rules. But we want rules that will not kill growth. Rules of the Stability and Growth Pact are necessary to ensure sound public finances, but it must also provide the fiscal space to have also growth, jobs, prosperity in Europe.
And the Germans get that?
I think that the balance between investment and sound public finances is the key challenge that we have to face when we are defining these new rules for the Stability and Growth Pact. The second point, which is absolutely key, as you said, is to do our best efforts to come to a compromise by the end of 2023, because we need to give the signal to our citizens, to all the member states and also to the market that we stand ready to have new, efficient rules for the Stability and Growth Pact.
And funnily enough, this time it's Germany that may head into recession before anyone else. But I wonder, the market is becoming very negative on Europe, and it has done so now for weeks. Do you believe this idea of stagflation, is that a real risk, or there's too much negativity around the European story at this point?
I think there is too much negativity.
You don't believe in stagflation?
I believe that there is a necessity to give a new impetus to growth, to get a stronger and more sustainable growth. When we are talking about capital market union with Christian Lindner, I've been negotiating the capital market union for more than 6 years. And what is the result now? Nothing. So we need to move on. We need to decide. We need to have this capital market union to provide more funding to the innovation, to the disruptive technologies, to growth. That's the key point. I'm not an observer of the political life in Europe. I'm an actor. As an actor, I want more growth, more jobs, more prosperity, and there is a necessity to take some decisions to go this way.
And as an actor too, can I just ask you, did you get any phone calls from any French CEO this week when that probe was announced saying, how is this going to affect us? If China gets tough on us, we're going to have any problems. Did you have any sign from the French corporate sector, which we know is very strong, saying, are we sure we want to do this?
I got some phone calls, to be very frank. I got some phone calls, but my response was quite clear. What do you want? What do you want? A weak Europe or a strong Europe? I think that we need a strong Europe. And a strong Europe is a continent and a political project which is able to defend its interests.
Well, this is very important. So you said CEOs called you and they said, can we get an explanation? And you said, we want to do it for a stronger Europe.
We want to do it for a stronger Europe. We need to have a fair competition between China and the EU. And if you want a fair competition between China and the EU, you need a strong Europe.
And you're not going to tell me who was on the phone?
No.
Okay, well, Bruno,
thank you so much
for joining us.